Dante Virelli stood at the balcony of his penthouse, high above the city that both feared and respected him. The night was quiet, almost eerily so, except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional flash of neon signs. His empire stretched across this city, built on fear, loyalty, and ruthless strategy. Yet, standing there in the shadowed light, Dante felt the familiar ache of emptiness gnawing at him. Power was his companion. Money was his armor. But love was a stranger. Tonight was supposed to be different, though. Tonight, he would marry. Not for love, not for desire, but for duty. The union had been arranged months ago, a pact between his family and another powerful clan. Alliances were fragile in his world. And Dante had learned early that every gesture of affection was a risk, every vulnerability a weakness. He smoothed the tailored fabric of his black suit and looked down at the streets below. From here, he could see the city's pulse, its bright veins, and its dark shadows. This marriage, this ceremony, was another strategy. He would stand at the altar, lift the veil, and seal the contract. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet, a small, unfamiliar stirring tugged at his chest. He ignored it. He had survived betrayals, assassins, and rival gangs. A veil could not unsettle him. Not now. Inside the Virelli estate, the halls were alive with activity. Servants whispered instructions. Maids adjusted silks and laces. And chefs prepared delicate dishes that would go mostly untouched during the long night of ceremony. But among all this preparation, one presence remained hidden, yet commanding. Leora. She was unseen by most, shrouded in a veil of ivory silk that obscured her face. Her hands, delicate and steady, adjusted the folds of her gown. Leora had grown up knowing her place, knowing her duty. She had been told this marriage was a necessity, a bond that would secure safety for her family, for her future. Love was never promised. It was not expected. And yet, she carried herself with an elegance that suggested something more, a quiet defiance beneath her calm exterior. Her reflection in the tall mirror caught her gaze for a brief moment. She saw the faintest flicker of fear, the tiniest whisper of hope. She could not name it. She could not trust it. And yet, in the shadows of her room, she imagined a life where she could make choices, a life where she could decide whom to love. That thought made her chest ache in a way she did not understand. The ceremony began with a quiet, almost ceremonial hush. Candles lined the grand hall, casting long shadows on marble floors. Guests dressed in the finest silks and jewels watched with polite curiosity. They were here for spectacle and for alliances, and none dared breathe out of turn. Dante entered first, his presence commanding the room. His black suit was flawless, his posture perfect. Every eye turned to him, yet he noticed nothing beyond the task before him, the ceremony. He stepped forward with measured grace, each footfall echoing across the hall. This was his world. He knew its rules, its dangers, its boundaries. And yet, tonight, something felt different. From the far end of the hall, Leora stepped forward, her veil brushing the floor. She moved with confidence that belied the trembling beneath her calm exterior. The silence of the room pressed against her ears, but she ignored it. All eyes were on her, all attention drawn to the mystery hidden beneath the silk. She felt like a shadow passing through the light, and yet, somehow, the light did not consume her. Dante's eyes, sharp and unyielding, followed her every step. He had never seen her. He had only heard descriptions. Graceful, beautiful, composed, intelligent. But as she approached, even from beneath the veil, there was a presence about her that unsettled him. She was more than a bride. She was a force. They met at the center of the hall. The officiant's words began to echo, but Dante barely heard them. His focus was entirely on her, the way her shoulders held themselves, the calm that seemed to radiate even in a room full of tense onlookers. And then came the moment he had expected for months, to lift her veil. His hand reached forward, slowly, carefully, as if touching her skin would somehow alter the course of fate. Leora's heart raced. She did not flinch, but the warmth of her pulse seemed to resonate even beneath the silken barrier. When his fingers finally brushed the veil, Dante's world shifted. Beneath the delicate silk, her eyes met his. And in that instant, something unnameable passed between them. Fear, defiance, longing all tangled together in a single, electric current. Dante felt it deep in his chest, a stirring that he had thought long dead. His heart, accustomed to command and control, faltered. For the first time in his life, he felt vulnerability. Not weakness, exactly, but the dangerous pull of feeling. The undeniable draw of someone's presence so profound that it threatened everything he had built. Leora met his gaze steadily, and yet inside, she trembled. She had not expected this. She had not expected the man who ruled with iron and shadow to feel caught. And perhaps, for the first time, she dared to hope that this was not only duty. The officiant's voice continued. A distant echo. Words of promise and obligation fell into the space between them, yet Dante barely heard them. His focus remained on her, the fine lines of her face revealed beneath the veil, the fire in her gaze, and the softness in her posture that spoke of strength wrapped in grace. The hall seemed to fade. Guests became shadows, candlelight became a blur, and all that remained was the space between Dante and Leora. He could feel the weight of his empire pressing down on him, the demands of loyalty and fear. But for a fleeting moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the woman before him. He wanted to ask her something, anything, but words failed. He had not anticipated this. He had not anticipated feeling anything beyond duty. And yet, here it was, undeniable and raw. The officiant finally spoke the words that would bind them forever. Dante's hand lingered for a heartbeat too long, and Leora's lips parted slightly in a silent question. Their eyes locked once more, and in that gaze, unspoken promises were made, promises neither dared name, yet both could feel. The ceremony concluded with polite applause, but neither Dante nor Leora heard it. Their world had narrowed to the shared space between them, a fragile line between duty and desire, fear and longing. Later, as the guests began to leave, Dante escorted Leora to the private chambers above the hall. The halls were silent now, save for the soft echo of their footsteps. He opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "Do you regret this?" he asked quietly, his voice softer than she had expected. It was not a command, not a demand, but a question that revealed a crack in his armor. Leora paused, considering her answer. She could lie. She could pretend to be indifferent, but she did not. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. I do not know what this will be, but I do not regret it." Dante studied her, noting the honesty in her words, the courage it took to speak it. And for the first time, he wondered if he could allow himself to feel something beyond obligation. That night, as they were left alone in the dimly lit room, the city sprawling below them, Dante could not stop thinking about her presence, her strength, the fire that seemed to shimmer beneath her calm exterior. He did not understand it, and perhaps he never would, but he could not ignore it. Leora, too, could not stop thinking about him. The man she had been told to fear, the man whose name carried weight and danger, had touched her heart in a way no one had ever dared. She felt drawn to him, even as she feared the consequences of that attraction. And so, the night passed in silence, each lost in thought, each wrestling with emotions neither had anticipated. The city outside remained indifferent, its lights casting long shadows across the walls. But inside that room, a quiet storm had begun, a storm of longing, tension, and possibilities that neither duty nor fear could fully contain. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, Dante stood by the window once more. He could see the city waking, unaware of the change that had taken place in his heart. He did not know what the future held. He did not know if love could survive in his world of shadows and obligations. But one truth was clear. When the veil had fallen, everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Hook. Cliffhanger. Dante turned back toward Leora, whose gaze met his with the same intensity. For the first time, he wondered if this marriage was not the end of his solitude, but the beginning of a force that could challenge everything he had built. And somewhere deep inside, he feared that losing her might cost him more than any rival ever could. The Virelli estate was quiet now, but the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. The grandeur of the halls, the echoing steps, and the flickering candlelight created a world that felt suspended between reality and myth. Dante walked through the corridors, each step measured, each thought weighed. His empire thrived in chaos. But tonight, inside these walls, he felt an unfamiliar disquiet. Leora followed silently, her veil now folded neatly at her side. She had begun to sense something in Dante that was impossible to ignore. A depth beyond the public image of power and menace. He was more than a mafia boss. He was a man shaped by loss, fear, and unspoken desires. And yet, despite the shadows that clung to him, there was a vulnerability he rarely allowed others to see. They reached the private study, a room lined with books, dark wood, and the scent of polished leather. Dante gestured for her to sit, though he remained standing, as if the weight of his empire still demanded it. Leora obeyed, her eyes scanning the shelves filled with the knowledge and secrets of a man who ruled more with fear than affection. Dante began, then stopped, as if words themselves were a challenge. He had never struggled for words before. Not in business, not in battle, not even when confronting betrayal. But here, with her presence so close, the sentences failed him. Leora tilted her head slightly, curious but composed. Yes? She prompted gently, her voice soft, yet unwavering. He studied her, noticing the subtle way her fingers rested on her lap, the quiet tension in her shoulders, the calm in her gaze that belied a flicker of apprehension. I was expecting nothing, he admitted finally. I was expecting duty, obligation, empty words. Not this. His voice faltered just enough to betray the storm beneath. Leora's heart thumped. She had not imagined that her presence could stir him in such a way. And what is this? She asked, careful not to push too far, careful not to betray the fragile line she had been walking all her life. This, he said, gesturing vaguely between them, is alive, unpredictable, dangerous. And yet, I cannot ignore it. She nodded slowly, understanding, yet equally unsettled. They were bound by duty, by expectations, by alliances neither of them could ignore. And yet, in the quiet of this room, the rules seemed to blur. Their first moments of conversation were cautious, tentative. Leora asked questions about his world, about the empire he commanded, about the decisions he made that shaped the lives of thousands. Dante answered, but selectively, revealing glimpses of his humanity through stories of loyalty, loss, and the burdens of leadership. As the hours passed, an unspoken tension began to weave between them, subtle and insistent. A brush of hands while passing a glass of water, a shared glance during a pause in conversation. The quiet understanding in a nod, each small moment chipped away at the walls they had built around themselves. But danger was never far. Outside the estate, rival factions moved like shadows, plotting to exploit any sign of weakness. One such threat arrived unannounced. A masked figure slipped into the estate's grounds under the cover of darkness. Trained as an assassin, their intent was clear: to destabilize Dante, to strike at the heart of his empire, and to remind everyone that power was never safe. Leora sensed the danger first. She had grown up knowing whispers of assassination and treachery, and instinct guided her hand. Before Dante could react, she intercepted the intruder, using a combination of quick thinking and agility to block their path. She was not trained as a fighter, yet courage and desperation lent her strength. Dante arrived moments later, alerted by the noise of struggle. His eyes widened, not at the danger, but at her presence in the fray. Leora, usually composed and graceful, was fierce, determined, and unafraid of the shadowed figure that threatened them both. He moved quickly, overpowering the intruder with a precision that betrayed years of experience. Yet, even as he neutralized the threat, his gaze never left her. For the first time, he felt a surge of protectiveness so intense that it startled him. Protectiveness not over power, not over business, but over her. After the intruder was subdued, Dante turned to Leora. She was breathing hard, her hair slightly disheveled, eyes bright with adrenaline. "You could have been hurt," he said, his voice low, laced with an emotion he rarely permitted himself. "I knew what I was doing," she replied calmly, though her pulse still raced. "I could not let him reach you." Dante's chest tightened. He realized then that she had risked herself not out of duty, not for obligation, but for him, and that realization struck him harder than any rival ever could. They retreated to the study, where silence settled like a thick, heavy blanket. Both were aware of the unspoken truth. Something had shifted. The delicate tension between them had deepened, grown more dangerous, more consuming. Hours later, the city outside continued its restless rhythm, oblivious to the storm brewing within the walls of the Virelli estate. Dante stood by the window again, looking down at the streets that were his domain. Yet for the first time, the world below seemed distant, almost insignificant. His mind was fixed on her, the calm defiance, the fire that shone behind her eyes, the courage that matched even his own. Leora approached quietly, her presence drawing his attention without a word. "Dante," she said softly, "I need to understand something. Why did you hesitate at the ceremony? Why did you pause when our eyes met?" Dante hesitated, unused to such questions, especially from someone he was supposed to see only as a political pawn. He turned to her, the candlelight catching the sharp angles of his face, and found himself unable to hide the truth. I did not expect to feel anything. I never expected to feel this. You make me feel as though everything I built, everything I controlled, could vanish in an instant. And yet, I cannot look away." Leora's eyes softened. She had felt the same. She had seen the walls, the armor, the careful control he exerted over every part of his life. Yet beneath it all, there was a man capable of feeling, of longing, of being moved by something beyond power. And she realized she was moving him not just with her beauty, but with her courage, her presence. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. No words could capture the storm between them. The fear, the desire, the unspoken promises that hung suspended in the air. The city outside hummed, but inside, time seemed to slow, compress, and stretch all at once. But the night was not theirs to claim. A sharp knock echoed through the study, breaking the fragile bubble of intimacy. Dante tensed immediately, instincts honed by years of danger kicking in. Leora stood behind him, alert. The door opened to reveal a messenger. pale and trembling, holding a note sealed with wax. Dante took it, breaking the seal with deliberate precision. The message was brief but chilling. A rival faction had learned of the attempted marriage, and their retaliation would come soon, targeting not just Dante's empire, but anyone close to him. Dante's jaw tightened. "They will not stop," he said grimly. "And now, neither can I." Leora stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. The simple gesture, quiet and steady, sent a jolt through him. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice firm. "Not as a pawn or a ruler, but as us. If you will allow it." Dante felt a warmth spread through him, a dangerous, powerful feeling he had not anticipated. He wanted to dismiss it, to bury it beneath the weight of duty and fear. Yet, the truth was undeniable. He could not imagine facing the coming storm without her by his side. The night stretched on, tense and heavy, as they prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Every shadow could hold danger. Every whisper could be a threat. Yet amidst the uncertainty, an undeniable connection had formed. It was fragile, new, and fraught with peril, but it was there. And in the quiet moments, when the candles flickered and the city slept, Dante caught himself stealing glances at her. Leora, aware but unafraid, met his gaze with a mixture of challenge and invitation. Each look was a silent acknowledgement. Their fates were now entwined, bound not by obligation alone, but by a force neither had anticipated, and neither could deny. Hook. Cliffhanger. The following morning, an urgent alarm shattered the calm. Outside the estate, the rival faction had made their move. Flames licked the edges of the city streets, and a message of blood and fire was clear. Dante's empire and Leora's life were now under direct threat. Dante realized, with a sudden, chilling clarity, that this was no longer a matter of politics or duty. Survival would demand more than power. It would demand trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond that had begun to form between him and the woman whose veil had stilled his heart.